It doesn't happen loudly. It doesn't happen with force. It happens in silence, in the invisible spaces where you don't even notice you're being bent. You think you're choosing her, but Simone de Beauvoir whispered the darker truth. You are being chosen, molded, directed into a role you didn't even know you signed up for. Most men live their whole lives believing they are the ones in control. They think masculinity means leadership, authority, and command. But look closer. The strings are pulled not by the obvious hand of domination, but by the subtle gaze of a woman who has learned, from birth, how to become his mirror. De Beauvoir called it the other. Woman, defined not as herself, but as a reflection, a contrast, a counterpart to man. And yet, in that very position of being defined as secondary, she discovered a secret lever of power, the ability to shape a man's image of himself without him ever realizing it. Think about it. When a woman looks at you with admiration, you feel stronger. When she withdraws her gaze, you feel weaker. You believe you're building yourself, but you're really building the version of yourself she rewards. This is the trap de Beauvoir revealed, the illusion that men are autonomous, when in truth, they are often dependent on a woman's silent approval. You imagine you're free, but every choice, every performance, every sacrifice is subtly guided by the question, will she approve? Will she see me as worthy? And in that question, you hand her the keys to your identity. You call it romance. You call it partnership. But underneath the flowers and the vows, de Beauvoir saw something more sinister. She saw men living not as authors of their lives, but as actors on a stage directed by women who claim to be supporting characters. And here is the paradox. The more a man bends to earn her love, the less of a man he becomes in her eyes. She senses the weakness in his surrender. She despises the mask he wears to please her, and yet she put the mask there in the first place. De Beauvoir teachings reveal that most women control not by shouting commands, but by holding the mirror in which a man searches for himself, and men, terrified of facing the void of their own souls, stare into that mirror until they no longer know who they are. The control isn't external, it's psychological, invisible, and devastating. De Beauvoir didn't soften this truth for comfort. She exposed it with the precision of someone who lived inside the paradox of love and power herself. She wrote that man seeks transcendence, while woman is pushed into immanence, forced to reflect, support, and validate his identity. Yet in that forced role, she gains the ability to shape him silently, to decide who he becomes in his own eyes. And this is why so many men never realize they are being ruled by approval. The secret is subtlety. A woman rarely tells you outright who she wants you to be. Instead, she rewards certain behaviors, starves others, and lets you do the work of sculpting yourself to fit her picture. This is not always malicious. It is unconscious, cultural, inherited. But it is powerful, and most men are blind to it. Think about the choices you've made that seemed your own. The haircut you kept because she liked it. The career decision you justified as practical, but secretly made to appear more impressive. The hobbies you abandoned because she wasn't interested. Slowly, your individuality erodes, not by force but by influence. De Beauvoir's brilliance was in showing that power doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it hides in vulnerability. Sometimes it cloaks itself in the illusion of dependence, when in reality it is dictating the rhythm of your entire life. And men, here is where the danger sharpens. When you no longer know who you are outside of her validation, you become trapped. You can't walk away because you fear being nothing without her. You mistake the withdrawal of her gaze for the collapse of your existence. And in that moment, she doesn't even need to control you. You control yourself in service of her approval. De Beauvoir described this as the tragedy of men who define themselves through women. They think they are lovers, protectors, providers, but underneath, they are dependents, feeding on the recognition a woman gives them like oxygen. Remove the oxygen, and the man collapses. This collapse is not love lost, it is identity lost. Here is the irony. The more you surrender to this unspoken power, the less she respects you. She feels your dependency like a weight. She sees the performance, the bending, the softening of your edges, and she grows restless. What once drew her in now suffocates her. De Beauvoir's dark truth is not that women are evil or manipulative, It is that they are trained from childhood to master the art of subtle influence, while men are trained to seek validation in their eyes. One plays the mirror, the other stares into it. And in that dynamic, most men never even learn to see themselves clearly. This is why so many relationships collapse not in chaos, but in quiet disintegration. She doesn't rage, she doesn't scream, she simply grows cold, distant, disinterested. And you wonder what you did wrong, unaware that what killed her attraction was your obedience, your predictability, your desperate performance. She didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourself in her mirror. The only escape de Beauvoir offered was the same one she demanded for women: freedom through authenticity, to stop living as reflection, whether male or female, and to face the terrifying task of standing as a subject in your own right. For men, this means breaking the chain of dependence on her gaze. It means facing yourself without applause, without validation, without permission. And that is a task few men are brave enough to even attempt. De Beauvoir knew this hidden dynamic better than most because she lived it. She watched how men projected strength, leadership, and purpose, but behind closed doors, they crumbled without her affirmation. She wrote that women are conditioned to be the arbiters of male identity, not by brute command, but by silent expectation. And the man, blinded by his need to be chosen, willingly submits to the subtle chains she places on him. He thinks it's love, but it's dependency. The cruelest part is that most men defend their own imprisonment. They insist that devotion is noble, that sacrifice proves loyalty, that pleasing her is a mark of real masculinity. Yet in those defenses, they reveal their blindness. They are not free. They are bent, reshaped, reduced to characters in her private myth. And when she grows tired of the character, she replaces the man without hesitation. This is what de Beauvoir meant when she said women are not born, but made. They are made by culture, by expectation, by the weight of history, into masters of influence that feels like fragility. Men misread this fragility as weakness, when in reality it is a weapon sharper than dominance. By presenting themselves as needing, they make men the needy ones. By appearing dependent, they make men the dependent ones. Look at the patterns around you. How many men live entire lives chasing the approval of their wives, girlfriends, even women they barely know? They buy the car to impress. They climb the ladder to be admired. They bury their desires in silence just to avoid her disapproval. And in that bargain, they trade away their souls piece by piece. De Beauvoir's dark truth is that women don't need to shout to control you. They only need to watch. Their gaze is enough to shape your choices, enough to bend your will. And when you're too terrified to face yourself in silence, her gaze becomes your compass. Without realizing it, you outsource your manhood to her. She becomes the judge, and you the condemned. The tragedy is that this control is unsustainable. She cannot respect the man who builds himself only in her reflection. At first, she enjoys the attention, the performance, the worship. But slowly, she begins to see through it. And when she does, the attraction withers because there is nothing left of you that is real. Men confuse control with comfort. They think that if she isn't yelling, if she isn't forcing, then they are free. But de Beauvoir shattered that illusion. Control can be soft. Control can be disguised as love. Control can be the invisible current that carries you far from yourself until you wake up and don't recognize the man in the mirror. And here's the part most men don't want to hear. You are complicit. You trade your authenticity for the illusion of acceptance. You sacrifice your independence for the fragile comfort of being chosen. You betray yourself because it is easier to play a role than to confront the terror of standing alone. And that betrayal is why she loses respect for you. De Beauvoir insisted that freedom requires rebellion, not against women, but against the urge to let anyone else define you. To break this control, you must endure the unbearable silence of your own self. You must become a subject, not a reflection. You must learn to live without her applause. Only then can you meet her as an equal, not as her puppet. A man rarely notices when the ground beneath him is shifting. He tells himself he is the leader, that his decisions steer the course of his life. But beneath the surface, subtle forces are steering him. Gestures, silences, expectations he can't quite name. By the time he realizes it, He has built his life around someone else's invisible approval. And the worst part is, he thought he was acting freely the entire time. Simone de Beauvoir observed that women, cast into roles of dependence, learn to survive through influence rather than force. They cultivate intuition, not as mysticism, but as survival strategy. They know how to guide without appearing to guide, how to persuade without ever giving an order. And men, eager for reassurance, become easy prey for this unspoken game. What feels like romance is often something closer to conditioning. You've seen it in your own life. The way you change your tone when she looks displeased. The way you hesitate before saying what you truly want because you're anticipating her reaction. The way you second-guess yourself, not because of logic, but because you fear her silence. These small adjustments pile up until you've been reshaped, not by your will, but by your need for her acceptance. And here's the cruel irony. The more you adjust, the less she desires you. She doesn't fall for a man who bends with every breeze. She falls for the one who stands rooted, unshaken by her storms. But you've been trained to believe that bending is the path to love, so you contort yourself into knots until all that's left is a hollow imitation of the man you once were. What de Beauvoir revealed is that this isn't always conscious. A woman may not even realize the grip she holds. She has been taught her whole life that her worth comes from shaping, supporting, and validating the men around her. So she carries that script into love, unaware of the damage it does. And men carry the opposite script, that their worth depends on being chosen, admired, confirmed in her eyes. Together, this creates a perfect storm. Two people, each blind to the deeper forces driving them, reenacting patterns older than themselves. She expects to mold. He expects to be measured. Neither stops to ask if the performance is real. Neither stops to question whether love can survive once the masks are removed. And so the cycle continues, generation after generation. But there is a way out, though it is brutal. It begins with silence. Not hers, but yours. The silence of refusing to explain yourself, refusing to seek permission, refusing to contort your being for approval. That silence terrifies most men because it feels like rejection. But it is in that silence that your real voice is finally heard, first by yourself and then by the world. Do not mistake this for coldness. It is not about despising women, nor about retreating into arrogance. It is about reclaiming the space within yourself that you abandoned when you made her the judge of your worth. A woman cannot truly meet you until you stop living through her eyes, and you cannot truly meet her until you no longer fear being unseen. Most men will never take that step. They will cling to the illusion that comfort is love, that obedience is devotion, that dependence is partnership. But those are lies you tell yourself to avoid the harder truth, that love without freedom is not love at all. It is theater, and you are the actor who forgets he is only reading lines. If you want something real, the mask has to burn, and when it burns, you may find yourself alone, stripped of applause, stripped of safety. But in that raw place, you finally see yourself without distortion, no longer reflected in her gaze, no longer bent by her silences. You stand face to face with the man you actually are, and from that place, the kind of love that remains is no longer a performance. It is recognition. There comes a moment in every man's life when he feels the hollowness of his own performance. He wakes up next to someone who once adored him, but now looks at him with quiet indifference. He cannot explain what changed, because he did everything right. He gave, he compromised, he bent over backwards to prove himself, and yet, the more he gave, the less she seemed to see him. Simone de Beauvoir understood this paradox deeply. When a man loses himself in the pursuit of validation, he becomes invisible to the very woman he is trying to please. She doesn't see a man anymore. She sees a mask, a shadow, a reflection of her own unspoken expectations. And nothing kills desire faster than predictability. What once looked like love now feels like suffocation. Men often respond to this with more effort, more sacrifice. They redouble their performance, thinking they can reignite her admiration by giving even more of themselves away. But every new compromise only deepens her contempt. Because beneath her surface, she is not drawn to the man who disappears into her orbit. She is drawn to the one who stands firm in his own gravity. You can see the tragedy play out everywhere. Marriages that dissolve without drama, only silence. Relationships that end, not in betrayal, but in exhaustion. Men left bewildered, asking what went wrong, when the truth is nothing went wrong at all. The truth is that his disappearance into her mirror was the slow death of the attraction she once felt. De Beauvoir's warning wasn't that women are cruel, but that men are too willing to surrender. They think love is about erasing themselves, when in fact love only survives when two whole beings stand side by side. When you abandon yourself to please her, you do not give her love, you give her a ghost. And no woman, no matter how patient, can stay in love with a ghost forever. This is why the most dangerous moment for a man is not rejection, it is acceptance. Being chosen feels intoxicating, but if you have not first chosen yourself, her acceptance becomes a cage. You decorate the cage with romance, with vows, with promises, but it is still a prison. And eventually, the one who built the cage will grow restless inside it. The path forward is not grand gestures. It is not more words, more flowers, more desperate proofs of loyalty. It is the quiet, ruthless work of building yourself without an audience. It is discovering who you are when no one is watching. And if that self cannot stand on its own, no amount of her approval will ever make you whole. But here is the truth that frightens most men. This work is lonely. It is stripped of applause, stripped of reassurance. It demands that you face your own shadow, the insecurities, the fears, the emptiness you've been hiding behind her gaze. And until you do, every relationship will be another stage, another performance, another cycle of slow disintegration. Yet for the man who endures it, something shifts. He no longer walks into a room seeking eyes to confirm his worth. He no longer fears her silence because he has learned to stand in his own. He becomes unshakable, not because he is arrogant, but because he finally knows who he is. And that man cannot be quietly controlled because he no longer needs the mirror. A man who reclaims himself no longer fits the mold that most women are used to shaping. His presence unsettles them because he refuses to bend, refuses to be measured by their standards. At first, they may accuse him of arrogance, of coldness, of being too much in his head. But what they are really sensing is a man who cannot be bent by silence or flattery. And that kind of man is rare. Simone de Beauvoir warned that relationships built on dependence are doomed to collapse under their own weight. When a man becomes only what she projects, the relationship is nothing more than two illusions dancing. But when he becomes whole in himself, something dangerous and beautiful emerges. The dynamic shifts, and she must meet him as he truly is. No masks, no mirrors, only reality. This is not the easy path. It is not filled with reassurance, nor with the constant comfort of being admired. It is a path through solitude, where you learn to face yourself without her gaze to steady you. It strips you of the fantasy that someone else can complete you. And when the fantasy burns, you are left with only the truth. Most men are terrified of that truth. They would rather cling to the role, even when it suffocates them. They would rather perform until the day they die than risk standing alone in silence. But in that choice, they lose everything that makes them men. They trade authenticity for comfort, and comfort always rots into contempt. The man who chooses differently begins to see the world with new eyes. He sees the games people play, the masks they wear, the illusions they depend on just to get through the day. And while it isolates him at first, it also frees him. He no longer has to chase, to prove, to perform. He is enough without the script. Ironically, that is when women feel the strongest pull toward him. Not because he needs them, but because he doesn't. His presence radiates independence, his choices are not dictated by their approval, and his silence carries more weight than another man's endless words. He is no longer a reflection of her imagination. He is a reality she cannot control. And here lies the kind of love that almost no one experiences. A love not born of need, but of freedom. A connection between two whole beings, each having faced their own shadows. No projections, no puppets, no silent control. Only choice, only truth. But let me be clear, most men will never walk this path. They will keep bending, keep performing, keep living through women's eyes until they vanish into masks that were never theirs to wear. They will call it love, even as it drains them. And they will die as actors, never once meeting the man they were meant to be. If you've listened this far, you already know what must be done. Stop waiting to be chosen. Stop molding yourself into someone else's image. Choose yourself fully, unapologetically, relentlessly, because only then will you be free from the secret control you never realized was shaping your life. So take this message and do not let it fade. If it struck something deep, don't just scroll past. Act. Share it with another man who is still lost in the performance. Like this video, subscribe for more, and help spread the truth. Not for me, not even for you, but for the next man still living as a reflection, waiting to be set free.